So our next speaker is Dr. Justin Buchannan, who is the geneticist for Feedlot. You've been with Feedlot for 7 years, I believe. Did his graduate degrees at Oklahoma State University and a postdoc at UC Davis with Allison, I think, right? Allison met you now. And so got a lot of good background, but I think the thing that's most interesting is that Justin has access to over 60,000 scores, I think is where you're at now, as far as the heart scores through their program. So Justin, I'm just going to turn it over to you and
Thanks, Mark.
we got the remote. You're going to stick.
Just
You got it. All right, one more set.
Thanks, Mark. We have to start with acknowledging all the work at CSU and Dr. Holt. That's really been a great deal of work that's allowed us to really take congestive heart failure and run with it at Feedlot and start just phenotyping immediately and start doing research. So thanks to that group for all the work they've done so far. So the majority of this talk is going to be focused on a paper that just came out last month in Frontiers. This was in collaboration with the team at GenCove as well as Mike McNeil. We published variance components and some phenotype information on a population of cattle that we heart scored. A little bit of background for why we care so much about this trait at Feedlot and why we've been working on it for this many years. So we're a vertically integrated cattle producer. We have commercial ranches spread across the Pacific Northwest. We have 2 feed yards. One's located in Grandview, Idaho. One's in Pasco, Washington. We sit somewhere close to 200,000 head on feed. We also, just up the road from our Grandview plant, we have a packing plant we're a partner in called CSB Packers. Our genetics team does research in genetic improvement. We also have several purebred herds in which we apply that research across our production chain. So 4 or 5 years ago, we really started to pay attention to congestive heart failure, just looking in the dead pile. These are 2 classic cases that we see. These were August 2021 in our Grandview feedlot. Pretty classic cases like Dr. Holt showed. These are 4 borderline 5s. You can see the left and right ventricle is collapsed, taking kind of a rounded shape, and they look in person, they look like a deflated basketball. They're just really flat and they've just kind of collapsed. For reference, there's a normal heart that we see in the packing plant pretty regularly, nice and tight, nice apex at the bottom. So we've been keeping track of this trait 4 or 5 years across both of our feedlots. This is data from the Grandview feedlot. We do notice a little bit of seasonality. So when on the x-axis here, this is week of the year, so starting in January. As we go across, when it starts to get warm in Grandview, that April-May timeframe, we start to notice these cardiac cases tick upwards. We start to see a seasonal pulse. It could be due to heat, the stress events that happen in Grandview. It could be timing of when those cattle hit our feed yard, typically in the fall. And when they get about this point here, they're starting to get close to harvest. This is one example of what we sometimes see in the feedlot. This is a group of ZX heifers. These are Angus and Angus Hereford cross, single origin. These came off our ZX ranch in Paisley, Oregon. So we had 988 head received December of 2020. They were supposed to ship the first week of August, between the 3rd and the 9th. We had 32 total mortalities. 26 of those were heart failures. If you look at the timing, so this is April, we started to lose some to hearts. As we get right here, the last 2 to 3 weeks to harvest, we lost the majority of those calves right at the end. So these were black-hided calves off of our native ranch system, and that's not uncommon to see. Towards the end of the feeding period, we'll just have a big loss due to hearts. So we wanted to start doing some research in this area as well. So we adopted Dr. Holt's scoring guide. We appreciate this guide. It's very handy for us. So we've kind of taken this and kind of split these into 2 buckets that we think about. So normals, like it's been mentioned before, 1s and 2s. Congestive heart failure case, we really look at those as being the 4s and 5s. So what we did is we went to our packing plant, CS Beef, myself and Dr. Raymond and a handful of technicians. We started scoring hearts. So what we do is we place a technician over here right as the viscera come out of the animal. That person's staying there with a scanner and a laptop, and they score hearts through the fat cattle harvest every morning at CS Beef. So these are some pictures of what we pulled out of CS Beef. Pretty standard representation. There's that normal that we see. Start to see some expansion in the ventricles on both sides as we get to a 3, then 4s. 5s look like a deflated basketball. Like I said, they just kind of deflated. There's no more tone left, and not a good scenario to see. Here's the phenotype collection we've done since 2020. So scoring hearts in the packing plant. These are all cattle that walked into the packing plant on their own, all healthy fat cattle on the outside. So since 2020, we've scored 62,000 hearts. Globally, the total rate of 4s and 5s is about 4.4%. So 4.4% of the cattle, at least in our plant that walk through the door, have a heart that's 1 or 2 stressors away from becoming a mortality, right? It's 1 more heat stress, it's 10 more days on feed, and that's going to be a mortality, and they won't get on the truck, right? Again, these are fat cattle only, and these all walk through the plant at CS Beef. So we want to do some genetic analysis. So we partnered with GenCove Inc. They did some low pass genotyping for us and did some genetic analysis. We selected 5,700 out of our population. These were contemporary grouped with data captured from feedlot arrival all the way to the packing plant. We excluded heart score 3s for this analysis. We wanted to create 2 kind of clean buckets. There is some variation in heart scoring. So we wanted to create a population of normals to compare to a population of affecteds. GenCove did their low pass genotyping. We got about 12 million SNP markers back. One of their geneticists filtered that down to about 1 million markers to do a GWAS. In that GWAS, we had about 15.7% of our cases defined as a 4 or 5. 2 slightly different models. The top model, we didn't include contemporary group information. The bottom one, we did. Heritability in this analysis came out between 0.3 and 0.42. A little bit surprising to us when we first saw that data. We weren't quite sure what the heritability was of this trait, but this is really good news for producers. It gives us a tool. We can create a genetic test that will reduce the incidence of this trait over time. We did take a look at some of the work done from the guys at US Mark. They found 2 markers in their population that seem to have an association with the test or with the trait. We really saw just a slight peak here at this BCHF5 marker, they call it. If you add contemporary group data, that goes away. So really this looks like a polygenic trait, similar to something like carcass weight or something else. This is the population structure of the population we genotyped, so that 5,700. This is genomic breed as predicted by the GenCove platform. They can tell us what percent of the cattle are based on genotype. As you go towards the right of the x-axis down here, these are more Angus type cattle. So the gray dots would really be cattle in this population that are greater than 80% Angus. As you move this way, we get over towards dairy crosses and Charolais. This graph is the same graph we just saw. Now it has heart score laid over the top as a red dot. So 4s and 5s are now the red dots. You notice that there is 4s and 5s in just about every breed type and breed cross we have. There might be some slight concentration over here on the Angus side of that graph, and we'll show some more data on that. This is another way of looking at breed type. This is the breed classification when those animals are processed into our feed yard in Grandview. So English cross, these are black-hided ranch origin Angus type natives. These are Angus beef on dairy calves. Then we have Charolais beef on dairy. Smokies are Charolais sired Hereford Angus crosses. We did have a few Holsteins. The big issue that sticks out to us is these black-hided cattle that come off our ranches and come off of a native ranch background. Percent 4s and 5s is pushing 5% through the plant. Something about the Holsteins seems to help that out a little bit as you do those crosses. Crossbreeding does seem to help make this trait go away in some sense. We do have a little bit of elevation in our Smoky population. Again, those calves, the Smokies are up to 50% Angus on average. This is some work done by the geneticist at Genco. This is Lex Flagel's work. So on the bottom here, we have heart score. On the y-axis, we have percent Angus ancestry. As we look at the 1s and 2s versus the 4s and 5s, 4s and 5s are somewhere 60 to 70 to 80% Angus. So there is some association we're seeing with Angus type cattle and percent 4s and 5s. Here's another way to look at that. The bottom here, as you move from left to right, that's percent Angus ancestry. As you move towards an Angus animal, the relative risk goes up of becoming a 4 or a 5. This is just the association we're seeing in the data. We did check the other breeds in our major population, larger population. So here's Charolais. Charolais has a bit of an inverse risk. Dr. Holt was talking about yaks, maybe Charolais having an origin in high altitude France. Maybe there's some association there. Hereford, it's pretty flat. Our ranch cow population has some percent Hereford in it. So there should be a pretty good estimate there. And our Holsteins, there's maybe flat to a little bit inverse relationship. We did pull out all of the feedlot data on that 62,000 head population that I showed in the beginning. So these are just phenotypes. Those are a lot of numbers to look at. So I'll go through a couple that are interesting. This is live weight at harvest. So as you move from a 1 to a 3, live weight tends to go up a little bit. So the best animals in the pen are about a heart score 3. Once they get to a 4, they start to fall off. It seems like once they move to a 4 or a 5, they're focusing on using energy to stay alive rather than continue growth, right? They're starting to kind of plateau. There's the carcass weight. It's pretty reflective of the live weight. 4s and 5s start to fall off the cliff. This is average daily gain in the first 120 days on feed, so up to the first implant or so. This is relatively flat. There's no numbers there because that's not a statistically significant difference across. They're all gaining about the same. There may be some slight dip as you get to a 5. In the last 120 days on feed, the differences start to show up. So once you get across to a 4 and a 5, you just start to see that performance drop off. Here's the full feeding period average daily gain calculation, matches live weight and carcass weight pretty well. Same story. Here's back fat and marbling score. Similar, I think, to some of the CSU data. The associations are not real strong one way or another. Again, these are not significant across heart score categories, pretty flat. Variation here could just be random. This is surprising to us, looking at Dr. Holt's research. It would make sense that fatter animals will be more hypoxic and there will be some issues. We just can't find that in the data. It does make sense though. So we also want to look at heritability and genetic correlations in the data set that we genotyped. So here's heritability estimates. This is a separate model from the GenCove work. This was done using some of the BluffF90 suite of software. 0.34 for congestive heart failure. And the rest of the traits fall in line with what we typically see in our own internal genetic evaluations. Genetic correlations, similar to Scott's data, carcass weights are our largest association. So the genetic correlation between heart failure, heart score, and carcass weight is about 0.4. Gain and dry matter intake also have some moderate correlation there. All of this taken together is really a little bit concerning to us. It was mentioned earlier, selection on our index is going to drag this trait up over time. If we just continue moving forward without a tool to address what's going on, the index selection is pulling heart score with it. So 4s and 5s are going to get more frequent. We just keep charging forward. So we also took a shot at doing an EPD for this. So the data that we presented earlier was all in the paper. This is fast forwarding to today's data set. So this is data compiled just last month. We're at 11,000 genotyped individuals with a phenotype in our model. 15 105 congestive heart failure cases in that model. So we validate our EPD with a 5-fold cross validation. We blind off a fifth of the data set, calculate the EPD, and then correlate it back to the original EPD. Our correlation right now in that analysis is 0.868. We're pretty happy with that correlation. It seems to be working pretty well. We have been using this test actively to screen our ranch bull populations, all breeds using this tool to screen. Here's one more validation look. So if this is the blinded EPD, if we just take those blinded EPDs and drop them into the bucket of their phenotype, it seems to work pretty well. The 1s and 2s, their EPD puts them in the 1 or 2 bucket. 4s and 5, their blinded EPD puts them in the 4 and 5 bucket. It seems to work pretty well. So moving forward for us, our approach is using this as a screening tool to select bulls. This is what the EPD looks like. Pretty normal distribution. You've got bulls on this side. They are probably not going to have too much issue with heart failure in their calves. Bulls over here, these are ones that we're going to actively kick out of our breeding program or not buy. A quick plug. This is news as of last week. This test is now going to be commercially available. So this data set is going to be part of a commercial seed stock product, as well as commercial feeder animal product available at Neogen. We also work with individual breeders. If you would like us to test your bulls, we can do that as well. Reach out to Neogen if you have some interest in getting your bulls or your animals tested. Big thanks to GenCove. They put in a lot of work in this project as well. And the team at Simplot, it's a lot of hands to collect all that phenotype data and keep it organized. Happy to take some questions.
Thanks, Justin. The questions real quick. Everybody have Thank you. Oh, I didn't see your hand, Allison. I'm sorry.
For these numbers, it looks like they're all calf numbers. Is there any difference between a calf number and a yearly?
Can you repeat the question, please?
You're asking if there's a difference between a calf number and a yearling fed number? All of we didn't actually collect any of that data. So all of our data was collected at harvest. So these would have been fat cattle, typical harvest age, 200 to 300 days on feed, that age range.
Yearly numbers.
Well, they
That's probably
yearly. What you're asking.
Yeah.
Calf fed versus yearly.
we might be able to compare that data. I don't have it off the top of my head though.
Allison?
Yeah, so your EPGs are being calculated using what genotyping data platforms? GenCode?
The genotype data today that's being implemented is the GGP 100K. So it's a subset of the 100K SNP marker panel.
And so for a commercial test, obviously they're not your cattle, they're somewhere else. What relationship would they have to your training population for the test to be expected to be accurate?
It's a hard one to answer. We've done it for some customers and they seem to match up with their PAP scores. So some bull breeders that we ran the test on, it did seem to match up a little bit with their PAP scores. We think maybe it's not too different. We do have a wide range in our reference population, which is why we kind of genotyped everything that we could. We're also not stopping today. So the 11,000 data set is going to grow. Our target is to get close to 50,000 genotyped animals so that prediction keeps getting better as we go. And we're going to keep spreading the net wide so that we make sure we get every breed included in that data set.
I'll just work my way back. Neville, and Don, did you ever stand up yet?
Just a quick question on the implant protocol. Was it the same across everything?
Pretty much the same across all. Two implants. I'm not sure what they were. They get implanted twice, once towards the beginning, one towards the end.
Don?
Question I have, maybe
one way to be the start of the question, maybe lower growth fires, and it should have been harvested a wider way. And since we pushed them 1,500 pounds per acre, 4 inches per pound.
Yeah, that's a good point. Today's cattle feeding, in the cattle feeding world, we push cattle pretty hard, you know, and the frame size is a big difference. We can push a Charolais dairy cross animal pretty big. It does make some sense. The first point about growth. I think was it Greta that came up with that theory that growth itself is a little bit inflammatory to the fat